So this should be episode 33 of the Integrated Rehab and Performance Podcast, and I have Jude Lenahan here from The Grove, down here in Nashville, Tennessee. Jude, thank you for being here. Really do appreciate it. Let you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what got you to Nashville, what got you going in golf, and some of your accomplishments up here so far.
Absolutely. I'm director of instruction at the Grove. I've been here for 10 years. Before that, I would teach in the summer times at a course here in Nashville called Belle Meade. In the winter times, I would go down to a course on Palm Beach called the Everglades Club. And I went to school at Western Kentucky, where I was always around golf, played golf growing up. Worked at a course there called Old Stone. My grandfather played golf, my dad played golf. It's been a passion of mine, and I was fortunate enough where I turned that into a career. And I've been doing it now for 18 years, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned a week or two ago that you had your guy at playing on the Corn Ferry here that you were kind of coaching and caddying for. Who was that again that was playing?
Yeah, that's Marcus Bird. He's from Bethesda, Maryland. He went to MTSU. That's where I met him.
I see.
And yeah, I've been teaching him for 7 years. So he's like a little brother. Comes in town, stays with me. My son loves him.
Wow, awesome.
But yeah, he made it to he was in the finals this year for the KFT, which was fun. I caddied for him at the Simmons Bank Open. We had a good time.
Perfect. Yeah, Nashville's been home to some pretty good tournaments this last summer. One of them being that live tournament down there at your home course there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was fresh off Bryson's victory, right? So, what was that like having Bryson there and just all the live guys?
It was incredible. So Bryson, that next day shows up. He has the medal on. He has the trophy that he's walking around. He took pictures with everyone. Every kid that wanted to touch the trophy, he let you put on the medal. He was so nice.
Yeah.
And he went out of his way, and the charm, and I would talk to him on the side, just ask him if you need anything. Bryson, like, how, if there's anything you need that you can't get this week, let me know. And he would just kind of laugh it off. He's like, I just need some sleep. I just need to get through this. I need to eat a lot and sleep, because it was 100 degrees that week.
Right.
But having him here and kind of like champion the U.S. Open and be the kind of person that he's become, really, and he's getting really comfortable in front of the camera and around the fans, it took the Live Golf Championship to a whole different level. And I think, we set records, the highest attended U.S. Live Golf event, and I think he was a large part because, he had the U.S. Open champion, as well as Koepka and Hatton and all those guys there. But I cannot say enough good things about him, the way he handled the fans. Even though he was exhausted from the week, he gave everything to everyone. It was really refreshing to see a superstar like that, like, go out of his way to sign every autograph and shake every hand.
Yeah, amazing. He's definitely a man of the people. Perceptions on him have certainly changed over the last couple of years, but I've always kind of been a fan, and then it's hard not to be these days, even with everything. But those other guys being there, the course, preparations for Live coming, what sort of changes were they making down there at the Grove? What do they do to kind of ramp things up and get it kind of ready for a tournament like that?
Yeah, so luckily the course itself is so well maintained, because we've had Simmons Bank Open, we have the KFTs here, we've had some really large USGA events, we host the Junior Cup every year. The course itself is always tournament ready, which sounds crazy, but it is. Like, you could plan a tournament today. The biggest thing is the 6 weeks, the buildup of just you have the build out of all the entrance, you have all the signs everywhere, you have the bleachers, you have the grandstands, you have the party hole on 15.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that goes into that just to get ready for that many people, really. It's a lot of foot traffic for 4 days.
Yeah, no doubt. Some of the more logistic stuff, but you're saying, the course is always being ready for that quality, that caliber of play.
The course was ready. The greens were ready. They played at the same stent meter, like the same speed on the greens that the members play it. They didn't have to cut the rough or anything.
Really? Yeah.
It was tournament ready, and that's just our turf care and the way the Grove really budgets for that is just amazing, and the members are very thankful for that, as am I.
Of course. I'm not so sure I would have been
Yeah.
too thankful for playing in tournament caliber rough all year long, but
This place is hard, man. If
yeah,
you haven't played it, it's hard, but it makes everyone better, which is good. It's a good place to teach out of because you can have any caliber player, and they want to practice and play and hit shots while they're here, which makes me a better coach because I can offer them more, kind of thing.
yeah, no doubt. And then any members that get the opportunity to play around Nashville, they get to kind of take a big breath, and maybe it's not playing quite as
Hmm.
hard as they're used to. So
Yeah.
that's nice. When it comes to instruction and working with students, I have to ask, the Grove, are you allowed to do you take students that are members and non-members? Are people able to come on and get some lessons?
I am fortunate enough where I do teach non-members as well. Yeah,
Great.
they've been so good to me over the past 10 years. Where at this point, I teach non-members as well. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes it handy.
Yeah.
At the end, we'll make sure that we give them some way of reaching out for anyone who's listening who wants to take some lessons. Uh, that being said,
Awesome.
your coaching philosophy, kind of how you go about teaching and instructing, if you had to describe it, how would you describe your kind of coaching philosophy?
My philosophy is it takes a village. So it takes me as a coach. It takes whether I have different. I could be just a short game coach. They could have a putting coach. It takes if they have PT, if they have fitness on the side, they have a dietitian, they have their golf coach at the university they play. It takes a village. The parents, your friends and family. So I'm big into that. I like creating a team environment because these kids and these people that come to me, they want to compare themselves to the high level Division 1 or PGA Tour or LPGA players. They all have a team,
Yeah.
and there's a reason they have a team is because it works. And I may be an expert in something, and you're an expert in so why don't we just combine that together for the help of this man or this woman that we're teaching? It just makes perfect sense to me. And then I like to teach all my players to be ready for the biggest moments, and the biggest moments you have the most anxiety
Yeah.
and you have the most pressure. And I think the best players in the world control the club, and without getting like too geeky, but like the center of mass and the face and the shaft pitch and all those buzzwords, they control it with their body. Because when your heart's racing, you can trust your glutes and your core and your legs and some stuff like that. You can feel your shoulders a lot easier than you can your hands, your wrists, a lot of wrists and all that stuff. So I try to have every player that walks out of a session with me have a better understanding of how they can control the club with their body, because 9 out of 10 times when they walk in, the club is controlling their body. It's the
Right.
exact opposite. They're doing something funky where their body is having to manipulate for a lack of awareness. And it could be a mobility problem. It could be a flexibility problem. That's where I reach out to professionals like you,
Yeah.
so we can get everything dialed in. But I try to make sure that under the most stressful situations, that they know what controls the club, how to control the club, and just how they can trust their feels and other practices. And it's not one way. They don't come. I don't. They're not all coming in swinging like Xander. We all have different, anatomies, different sizes, different shoulder widths, wrist to floor. Some people are way more flexible than others. Some people can generate speed a lot easier than others. So it totally on your body type what we can do, and you walk in. I'm just trying to sharpen the sword and get you to control everything with your body, basically. Which sounds easy, but it's what everybody's trying to do.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of taken away degrees of freedom. You can think of it. You had mentioned like getting a little too wristy or handsy under that anxiety and stress, and not thinking about the body. But so many more degrees of freedom here at the wrist to make
Mm-hmm.
tiny changes, right, which lead to
Mm-hmm.
drastic changes in contact and spin. So yeah, if you can kind of hone everything into more central, the body, and then let everything else
Mm-hmm.
come along naturally. I think that's a great way to go about it. And to hear it from a lot of people will see, especially on social media or things like that, getting into so many details, fine details, but to take it from the perspective of, hey, we know at some point you're going to be under a lot of stress, and this is where we need to train from. And so much of that is not being so precise or minuscule in certain ways, but building towards that, but starting from more of a solid foundation, and then always having that to fall back on. I want to mention too some of my favorite things as a provider in the rehab and kind of performance, more the physical realm, whether we're dealing with pain and injury or just lack of mobility and strength, is getting those videos from swing instructors who are working with a patient of mine, and seeing the translation from the gym floor, the rehab floor, the table, all this mobility and different stability areas that we're building back into them, and then watching that, getting that video of them using it in that swing, and that kind of aha moment, like, whoa, look this feels so much different, right? So I really do enjoy those moments when things, like you had mentioned, working together and seeing that translate from one thing to the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite rewarding, and I imagine from your perspective, you actually get to see the very, very end result where that ball does what you both are hoping it would do.
Hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Have you noticed that your philosophy has changed over the years at all? Or if you're working with club members versus younger members, or people not coming from the club, that's changed when you're down working out of clubs in the South or versus clubs up here? Has anything changed over the years?
Yeah. So I think that some people view me as successful, but I think I am way better now than I was a year ago. And then I was better a year ago than 2 years ago. And a year from now, I want to be better than I am today.
Yeah.
So your philosophy has to change a little bit, and you have to be willing to adapt because of the information that we have available. We have the biomechanics, we have the 3D capture, we have stuff that we've never had, and everything's getting a little better, right? So if I'm not willing to adapt and learn as I go, then I'm going to get stuck, and then my players are in turn going to get stuck, and then we're not going to get better. We're going to plateau, and we're just chasing our tail. But, Sportsbox AI is out, and it gets better every month. TrackMan gets better every month. The swing catalyst, the gas, the pressure plates get better every year, basically. Sasha McKenzie, all these doctors that are just pouring all this research and development into golf, that's available to me now, where 5 years ago that wasn't available to me. So my philosophies have had to adapt. And as far as what I try to teach everyone the same that walk in the door, whether they're a tour player, aspiring tour player, high level Division I, or a 30 handicap, as far as how I look at the swing and my order of operation is. But I know through TPI and through mobility and flexibility, and me trying to do this my own self, there's some limitations that they won't be able to do, right? The hand speed won't be there. The external right arm won't be there. Some of the internal hip stuff on the downswing won't be there. So you have to adapt to that. Like some people may start their arms a little bit on the downswing before their hips, because that's the only way they can generate that club head speed, and they're more closed, obviously, at impact. Some people can get open and they can really separate. So as far as looking at the anatomy, we're all different. We all have different levels of separation and speed and getting into the ground, getting out of the ground, all those forces. But I try to look at everyone with the same order of operation when they walk in. I'm looking at obviously the fundamentals, grip, aim, setup, but I'm looking at the face, then I'm looking at the shaft pitch, then I'm looking at their pivot, then I'm looking at their pressure, and I do that for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I think the discipline that I have to have looking at that is the only way that I can build the foundation for them to succeed the fastest way and to retain all the information, if that makes sense. But it's a long way of saying, yes, my philosophies change every year because there will be more information because of Sportsbox AI, or something will come out next year that we are able to measure now. We won't have to guess, or the TrackMan will get better, the cameras will get better, and then I'll be like, oh, well, now the spin loft is easier to read. It's just kind of stuff like that I'm obsessed with, and I need that thirst for knowledge, or else my students are just going to stay the same every year and they're not going to get better. And I think that's what being a good coach, I think that falls upon me, I need to have the knowledge, and then I need to be able to talk to them in different ways because we all learn different, right? So sometimes it's jargon, sometimes it's just kind of straightforward feel, ball flight laws, sometimes it's just in the dirt. It just, but you always have to learn, you always have to adapt, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I'm curious, is there any specific thing that you've kind of learned on the job over the years? You had mentioned like, like wrist to ground height, all these different things that you can measure and are measuring. Is there one thing that you think you're looking at or doing that most people aren't? Is there kind of one specific thing that you've learned just from experience that maybe other people aren't privy to?
I maybe before, but now I think we all have the same information.
Sure.
Like the guys that
Yeah.
I looked up to, the Blackburns and the Comos and the Dahlquists, the top guys, we all have the same information. Um, it used to be I always thought that people, because I was one of the, luckily I was one of the first ones to have a body track and some pressure plates,
Yeah.
and most people didn't get forward early enough, and through gears and stuff that we were able to measure tour players. The AMG guys have been great at this. They share their information so willingly, but we know how early those pros get forward and like the different center masses and stuff. But now, like if you're doing your job and you're trying to coach especially high level players, or even people that are trying to, go to school to play golf, I think you have to have that information. Um, so the only thing that I do that I know specific to me is probably my order of operation and how that I really look at a golf swing like a math equation. And if you don't have the right order of operation, you're not going to get the right equation.
Yeah.
And I try to teach that to aspiring teachers that come in or some of my assistant golf professionals that have gone on to be director of instructions elsewhere. Whatever your delivery is, it has to be the same every single time so you can be a consistent teacher because you want them to be a consistent player kind of thing. So I don't know if there's other than that, there's no like, oh man, like I have the right radial hinge at the right time, or my flexion's way different than anyone else's. Because I think there's no perfect way. If you look at Scotty and Xander, their left wrists are totally different, and they're both, almost, they could have been co-player of the years. So it's just about what they can do, what they're comfortable doing, and like we said in the beginning, what they can do when it
Yeah.
matters. Because I tell this to them all the time. I don't care. Like a new student will come in, and I'm like, I don't care how you hit it for the next 30 minutes. I want the movement to be better, and I want the feels. I want you to understand what we're trying to do, but I only care about what happens when you're on the golf course. And then eventually, if you want to start playing in USGA championships and as a professional, then I only care what you're doing, on those 4 days of those tournament days or the match play days. So that's all that matters to me as a teacher is can we get them to do that basically.
Yeah. Very cool. A tough question for you. What? How do you decide when to address something that is maybe unique versus accept it as a part of their swing, their body? In my world, it's a little bit easier. I spend my time measuring physical attributes and things like that, and with the help of some TPI information and different things like that, we have kind of norms that we want to be able to hit.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically like saying how I describe it to pros is when patients come in or clients, I try to give the pros back blank canvases, where people can do all the things they need to do. They can produce power effectively and stability effectively, and they can do it in a general golf swing type way. Translate it always back to the golf swing, but never getting into those
Mm-hmm.
technical mechanical things. So trying to get most people back to, baseline so they at least have the potential to start approaching their, talent ceiling and not have anything really
Mm-hmm.
holding them back. In your case, how do you know when to, work on something versus not work on something? Surely there's some stuff that's obvious, like this needs to change. But like you had mentioned with, radial deviation angles and things like that, when do you prioritize one and just accept others?
That is a great question, a really good question. And I have definitely, and I don't know a teacher that hasn't, but I have definitely been guilty in the past, especially when I was younger, of overworking a golf swing because it didn't look like it should to me. Um, if you don't measure things, then you're kind of all over the place, right? If you have the hack motion, you can kind of get, but it's if they can deliver it consistently on the downswing, especially because I'm a big backswing guy. I think that sets up a lot of structure. I think that allows you to swing free and all that stuff. But I have some people that come in with very funky backswings. And if they can deliver it the same way every time and they match it up, if it's a strong wrist, lead wrist, or whatever they're doing, if they can match that up under pressure, then I tend to just try to tell them and we try to figure it out. We measure everything, but all right, well, this is what you're doing when you do it really well. And we're going to take all this information down and we're going to take every video angle we can. And we're going to take all your shot link data, if you have that privy to you, or your decade or shot pattern, circles, whatever stat tracking you use. And we're going to really focus on this 6 weeks or this 90 days when you hit it really good. So when you get a little off, then we're just going to go back and work on what's unique to you.
Yeah.
Because I have overworked golf swings before when all it had to do was probably their strategy, or a lot of times you'll get these high level mid-ams especially, and they'll hit it really good and they'll go on the golf course and they don't hit it as good. The practice round's great, the golf course isn't good, when all it was one simple thing of they tend to line up right, they tend to stack forward so their ball position gets back, and then you try to change something in their swing when all it was under pressure you swing a little shorter, you try to flight everything, and then we start leaning on it, and we hit the high right driver, the low right 5 iron. But now, before I jump to conclusion on someone that's a really good player that has something unique going on, I try to get as much information as we can. I try to play golf with them more on the golf course and see if you can deliver this every time, like a Daniel Berger or Marcus Bird's a little unique, or Hayden Buckley on the PGA Tour is very unique. But he's a very good ball striker, and they deliver it the same on the downswing every time. So we need to know what you're doing when you play well, and then we probably need to wedge it and chip it better and just kind of work on course strategy and shot shapes and stuff like that. Because I have definitely overworked players in the past, unfortunately. And they do get a little lost, and then they become too technical,
Sure.
and then they lose feel. And if you lose feel, like all I'm trying to do is get you enough information when you practice where you can go out on the golf course and just react to what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're thinking about something that doesn't feel natural to you, because if I think your left wrist is too bowed and you can't hit it high enough to play on the PGA Tour, then I've taken away a lot of your magic and your athleticism, and I've done you more harm than good. And that will keep me up at night because it has previously. So I try, as long as they can do it under pressure and they understand what they're doing when they do it well, I'm totally okay with it because we have all the data and we have the numbers, and it shows that they can repeat it more often than not.
Yeah, very good. I like that, how much data you're collecting up front. And then as much science or data it comes down to, you're mentioning kind of at some point, there's a little bit of an art to it where you're making a decision based off your experiences and kind of what makes sense, but you always have something to fall back on.
The data and all that stuff is more for me.
Yeah.
And then if they ask, I'll tell them. But the good girls and the good guys, like they're artists, they're athletes, they're reacting to, and they can flip that switch when they need to. The data's more for me, so I can just have all my bases covered when they come back to me if they're struggling.
Gotcha.
But I try not to give them too much technical stuff because that can just bog them down on the golf course unless they ask.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know Charles Howe, but he's very technical. I'm sure he has all that stuff. I'm sure he would want to know that. But if you give that to like a Bubba Watson or a DJ or even a Scotty Scheffler, he probably, that's going to make him worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's similar in my world where a similar kind of example or experiences. I'll have patients come in or clients for like a day one. We'll measure something like, I've used this example on the podcast before, hip internal rotation, or maybe that lead side hip. And, you realize that they're early extending or, sliding through. They have no hip internal rotation is what I find on the table. I tell them this, and they say, okay, well, we'll get to work on it. And in the meantime, they go and hit some balls, and they realize, oh yeah, this hip does feel tight. I actually can't rotate into this hip, and they're starting to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start working on some things. After a week or two, we've opened up some space there. They go back to the range, and they're like, I can feel this now. I can feel how much more motion I get through this hip. This feels completely different. And it's like, good, we checked that off the list, but we also need to bring things back a little bit, because I don't want you thinking about that hip now anymore, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So that's great. We also, we spend some more time building stability in that hip, because I still don't want you moving through it. But now we got to figure out a way for you to feel, and up here in the brain, what it's like to stop extending, right? Because you've avoided that hip for reasons. Now you don't have to. That's great, but we need to make sure now that we're learning some kind of cueing, sequencing stuff, and then building a ton of hip stability, so that they can actually create some vertical force in through that hip and rotate through it, as opposed to just using all that mobility and that, I'm so comfortable sliding into this hip now. It's like, okay, but now we need you to be strong in that hip, right?
Yeah. Then they just spin out and hit it everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So say that's great.
Yeah.
Let's build some strength, and then let's get you stop thinking about your hip, and then when Jude tells you what to do, you can do it. So that's always the best cases there. But it kind of goes to your point where data, keeping some data from them or things like that. In my world, it's more like I need these people to be aware of the problem, and then after that, once we make some improvements to it, take the mind completely off it. You want your focus to be more outward as opposed to inward, unless it's part of your kind of safety mechanism, like you had mentioned earlier, where you're getting a little bit nervous, and at that point you have to do what you have to do. And what you had mentioned is you like to bring it more towards broad, central, as opposed to the details of like a wrist or something like that, which is always better.
They'll hit it everywhere.
Yeah. You had mentioned earlier some things that you've experienced, some of your swing characteristics or specific kind of uniqueness to your swing. Would you say there is something about your swing that is unique that might not, match up to Tiger Woods or someone like that? What is it about your
my
swing?
personal swing?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I had tore my hip flexor probably 4 years ago, and I played kind of all through it, and I played too soon. So I lost my load, and I started getting real throwy at the top. So that's taken me probably a year and a half or 2 years to kind of get back to like my baseline where I can actually like load and create space.
Yeah.
There's nothing I do close to Tiger,
Sure.
right? I mean, it's Tiger. I'm 40 years old. I play in about 6 events a year. At this point in my life, I try to not lose it off the tee and just chip and putt the lights out of it.
Yeah.
And I've turned into like a grinder, basically. But I mean, if you were to see my swing on video, it would look fine, plus handicap or whatever. But I mean, as an instructor looking at my old swing, it's like I don't like, those actors that don't watch the movies or whatever. I don't even like looking at my golf swing because I just rattle off 6 things that's wrong with it.
I see.
But I have to, for me, at my point, and it's perfect we're on this conversation, everything in my golf swing is related to me spending time with you. You could help me a lot with opening up my hips, and my hips have in turn made my calves really tight, and my balance and can't stay in the balls of my feet or to the heels. I get on my toes, but for me, I'm almost kind of plateaued where I'm not going to get any better. I'm not going to go to a +2 to a +4 unless I'm rehabbing and PT, and I'm working out with you basically. I would need a program from you, a medical professional, that would help me get better on the golf course, because there's just stuff that I need to do in the golf swing that I am physically limited to. It's a mobility problem, and in turn, that becomes a stability problem, right? They both kind of go hand in hand. But that's kind of like, that's where the whole it takes a village thing, because I'm firsthand that I'm kind of, my ceiling is as high as I can go if I don't get in the gym, become stronger, and become, especially my right hip. It's just led to a bunch of problems that I've never been dedicated enough to fix. So I just kind of like basically fake it around. It does help though that I'm okay at golf and I'm always playing with better players.
Mhm.
So it's, you always pick up stuff from them and like what they do. And, but yeah, there's nothing I do close to Tiger, unfortunately.
Okay,
Sorry,
gotcha.
Tiger. I try.
Yeah,
I definitely try.
that might have led to some of your injuries in the first place. It's hard to
Yeah.
violently try to be swing like Tiger, but yeah,
So I think my golf swing hurt my hip. I first, honestly,
yep,
looking back on it, like the stuff that I did, like you get a launch monitor and you start to feel, oh, I can swing to the right and I can hit up on it 2 degrees and I can really do this to get to 120 club head speed. And I, just hanging on my back foot, throwing my arms, dumping the shaft, swinging up on it. Um, and I think that's what led to my hip problem. And then I played through it, and then it made my golf swing worse.
hmm
But yeah, it's chicken or the egg kind of thing. But yeah, you have to be really strong in places. Obviously, your glutes and your core and stuff that I wasn't prepared to try to swing at that club at speed basically.
exactly. Yeah, and that is kind of right up my alley, where there is a kind of a specific spot that needs to be, a detailed assessment to tell us where these spots that do need to be strengthened, wakened up,
Hmm.
brought awareness to, where these spots where specifically mobility needs to be brought into, and then how do we integrate those back together. Um, you had mentioned, this happens and then this tightens up and this, and again, that's that idea of those compensations and things that I talk about with, golf instructors and pros is this idea of like compensations, and you guys have a pretty good understanding of it, especially with all the data that's coming out. But where maybe you're trying to work on something, and you're struggling to get the student to get these positions that you're looking for, and maybe eventually you do get them there, but then you start to lose the understanding of at what cost, and
Oh yeah.
right, because maybe like, we finally got this thing to look like what it needs to, and maybe even get some balls to start doing what they need to, but they come back maybe and same problem, or they can't hold it for too long,
Oh
maybe a
yeah.
couple of weeks, and you realize, well, they're forcing it because there's something else has now had to compensate to help get in that position, and there's no awareness brought into that compensation, and
Hmm.
it's almost makes it impossible to create consistency with it. Now, what you're doing really helps because you collect data everywhere, and so maybe
Hmm.
you're working with a client and you can identify those compensations better because you might be getting ground reaction force data with the plates, right? So you start to know,
Hmm.
oh, when we do this, all of a sudden their weight shifts way over here, and it might be hard to see in the shoes, but they're, the inside edge of one foot and the outside edge of the other foot is almost coming off the ground. You can't tell, but you'd be able to help identify all the domino effects of some things
Hmm.
if it's asking for too much. But yeah, again, those compensations, and in your case, having an individual area that caused all that downstream effect. That's exactly what I like to work on. In terms
Hmm.
of general
Yeah.
fitness stuff, we do have an option for that golf kind of specific programming, some stuff that me and someone are working on. But
Hmm.
um, best of both worlds, like you said, team. Yeah.
You have to be a team because I may get them in that position and it may be 8 iron at 50% speed, but if they can, they're not going to retain it. So they're going to leave, and as soon as they go play on the golf course and they add speed,
hmm
they're not going to be able to load up in their trail hip, or they're going to start throwing it, or yada yada yada. It's a waste of their time because they just don't have the strength or mobility or stability to stay in that position anyway.
Yep.
So, and I have to understand that to send them to you. So if I don't, I, I can't be the coach that I'm trying to be if I'm not aware that that's going to be a problem. So that's why you do need a team, and it does take more than one professional to get to the level that a lot of these golfers are trying to get.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I love having someone who's got all that data coming to in
Hmm.
the teaching. So those two mesh really well. If you see like a day one exam at the clinic with a golfer, the whiteboard just full of numbers and
Yeah.
words that they don't necessarily understand, but I do a good job of explaining it. And it kind of weaves a picture. You get data. It's like a chessboard. You get a bunch of data up
Yeah.
there, and you can start kind of saying how these things connect here, and this is kind of the plan going forward. So a lot of golfers really
And
like
then,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you rescreen them in 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, they have those numbers and they
Exactly.
see those charts, and how everything's tightened up and how, the range of motion has gotten so much better. And then, a lot of times I've been talking about better players and D1 players, but a lot of times it's just so these club members can play 18 holes without being tired,
Exactly.
or they can play 9 holes and I have to quit because their lower back's so injured because their glutes and their hamstrings were doing nothing for them.
That's right.
So it's more so just realizing that, oh, you're going to be able to play golf for a lot longer and a lot less effort, and you're going to get off the course and want to go back instead of I got to take 4 Advils and I can't play for the next 3 days because I played 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
So I mean, just the quality of life is so much better for them as well. So it's all up and down. It doesn't matter if they're a 36 handicap or they're on the PGA Tour. We all need that basically.
Yeah. Not to mention the club member guest member to be able to play in these tournaments and a couple of days in a row and be able to actually feel good about your play and your body, and not have that in the back of your mind is what if my back wasn't bothering me so much, or can I even play
Exactly,
today?
yeah.
Speaking of that, is there an injury that you've noticed kind of most common down there at the Grove, say for instance, since you've been there? Any one particular thing tends to be low back pain. Is there any other things that you're really noticing coming up?
I will tell you what I'm noticing here, and it's kind of specific to the Grove because we are a country club with a community. We have 700 houses on property, and they have a lot of indoor simulators. And they will come with a lot of right wrist injuries or tennis elbow or tendon issues around their elbow and forearm from where they just go in and they beat balls on that turf, and it's just literally turf on top of a concrete in their third-car garage.
Yeah.
We get that a lot.
Yeah.
And obviously there's lower back injuries that are usually hip issues, I think, that cause the lower back. But specifically to the Grove, I get a lot of where they come in and they have that elbow strap on and it's from they just go home and they just beat balls on that turf.
Yep.
And they're over the top. They're kind of throwing it right at the last second, club head outside the hands, and they're coming out of their posture, trying to shallow it out, and it just beats that toe into the ground. And I mean, I've had several students that it shut down for 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Right wrist especially. Yeah. So I tell them, like, you either got to put something under that mat or we just got to start hitting off the grass.
Yeah, when it comes to wrists, it's a lot of times that TFCC that it's almost think of it like a little bit of cartilage in that wrist that just gets beaten, especially in golfers, and then that just golfer's elbow. So tendons, if not treated well and appropriately, those things can last and just kind of linger and come back and come back. It's quite a process to get those things back to where you want them. It takes some precision in terms of like how you load those tendons, but very interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, in a community setting like that, where people have some access to simulators and things like that in the turf, and what can happen from that. So that's a good insight for me actually. And then other than that, so you had mentioned the hip being causing low back pain, and that's something.
I'm not about it like that, but I think that's normally when you look at their golf swing, and you could see it. But the way they get steep, and then they have to kick that right hip out to shallow it, like 80% of the golfers do. I'm just throwing that number out there, but a majority of those golfers go steep to shallow, and they don't have the glutes or the stability in the hips or the strength in the hips, and it just shoots right up to that lower back. And they all think it's lower back pain, but it's probably because they're weak in their hamstrings or glutes or something like that. And you could just see it in their golf swing.
Very interesting from that perspective, from someone who really understands the swing, all the mechanics happening in the swing. You might identify it as just, hey, this is something that will impact your performance. But you've gone a step further and be like, I'm associating this with a lot of people who end up with low back pain or are having low back pain, is they kind of present with this pattern quite a bit. And and for me, from my perspective, it's you have low back pain. Well, we look at everything, so we're not just working on the part that hurts, but always looking at what are the hips able to do. Because again, if they are running out of motion, I have a patient who has started with about 5 degrees of hip internal rotation, which is just nothing, and he's not alone. Pretty quickly, we bumped that number up to 25, on both hips. Trying to get to at least 30. But imagine walking around with 5x the mobility in your hip to do that. But in a golf swing, especially that lead side hip, we're getting to terminal hip internal rotation. You're going all the way for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that hip's running out of space almost immediately, then what gets dragged along is the pelvis. And once the pelvis
Mm-hmm.
starts changing its orientation, it drags the lumbar spine, that low back, right? So they can cheat range of motion by changing the orientation of the pelvis, which puts their back in a more vulnerable position, creates injury. But
Mm-hmm.
also it is actually dragging that low back into a different position as they swing, especially as they follow through, which is just getting that change into an undesirable position under speed and violence. That's low back pain.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the pain is coming from the back, but the initial cause is that hip. That's that root cause, that we talk about. So
Mm-hmm.
very interesting from your perspective, how you've put those two together for a different reason, just from watching that swing and being like, all the forces that must be going through that, that low back because of what's happening at the hip. And not to mention, I see the same two things happening all the time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
fascinating stuff. Other than that, when it comes to Grove and performance, on the performance side of things, what are you working on mostly with your clients or students? What is the big thing? Is it the big slice, that over the top, or are you finding that there's another kind of thing creeping its way into the most common issue? Is it just setup? Probably is actually the answer.
Yeah, but it's still, as far as like dynamic motions go, people still they wanna roll that right hand in, and that club gets behind them, and they want to lift their arms, and then they have to, as they have zero width, they've overfolded that right arm, and then obviously from there you have to extend, and when you extend as you turn, it's going to go over the top, and then they suck those arms in, hips go towards the ball, and they try to figure it out from there.
Yep.
But it's mostly, if I get 100 students walk in at any different level, a lot of my lessons, the first half of a lesson, is the first 2 feet of the backswing.
Yeah.
And as boring as that is, but if you have too much, supination in that right arm, or they roll that right arm under too much, and that club head gets open and behind them, then you just can't do anything from there, and you'll just fake it around. And those are the people that have the lower back issues because the club gets behind them. But it's still, if I had to pick one thing that I work on more than others, just as a mass coach goes, it's the first 2-3 feet of the backswing.
Yeah.
And then obviously the better players, it's more pressure, right? It's more like, because you'll if I get a better player walk in, they've already had multiple other coaches, and it's just kind of that 1% better. They're just trying to get a little better. They're trying to save a half stroke a day, but that's mostly like more advanced stuff and pressure and weight shift and kind of some of that stuff. But just a general answer is most people do the first 2 or 3 feet of the backswing pretty poorly.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
In your case, what is something that you found to be effective, or what are things that you're looking for in that first 2 feet of the backswing?
I don't want a lot of movement. I want the center mass to stay kind of loaded with that lead arm. I don't want you to set your wrist too early. I don't want you to go into left wrist flexion or right wrist extension too early. And I don't want you to open up your body too early. I think it just needs to slowly build. And I'll tell people this all the time, and some people get it, some people don't. But if that club was 100 pounds, how would you take it back? How would you take it back? Like, you would load up into that right hip. You would almost drag the club along to try to get it to go up. But most people, they start their arms, they start their hands, and then their body's catching up, and then their arms start first, and it's just a complete disaster. But it's basically, I want the least amount of movement before we start to go into the radial hinge. If we're hinging it, some people don't even need to hinge it. They may go into more flexion. Sure. If you look at like a DeChambeau, if you will, he doesn't have a lot of hinge. The best junior player in Tennessee, I think he's number 1 in the world right now. He doesn't have a lot of hinge. He's, superstar. But it's basically the least amount of movement in my hands for the first, I'd say 16 inches. And then we kind of go into everything that looks from there up is based on your grip. If you're strong or weak, then that'll kind of look a little different in your radial set and stuff. But it's the least amount of movement. That first foot and a half, 2 feet would be great.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. It's
Yeah.
something that doesn't get glamorized on social media or YouTube or what people might be seeing. You had said the first one or two kind of sessions maybe might seem a little bit boring, right, compared to what people are seeing online, but essential, right?
I think the first lesson is normally the most boring, and it's also the hardest.
Sure.
Because I'm going to look at your golf swing, and I'm going to try to reverse engineer your golf swing, and whatever your biggest problem is, I'm going right into that. Because that problem is snowballed into 3 or 4 problems that you have manipulated and got away with for who knows how long. So I'm going right after that one. So the first session is usually the hardest, and sometimes it's the most boring.
Yeah.
But you can look on Instagram and YouTube, and we can talk about shallowing until we're blue in the face. But if you don't have the right wrist structure and the right arm and the shoulder in the right place at the top with the width and all those buzzwords that the people sometimes understand, sometimes they don't. But if you don't have the right structure at the top, the club's not going to shallow. And then you're going to waste a year, 2 years, 3 years, thousands and thousands of dollars trying to shallow it when you had no chance because of what you did off the ball.
Yeah.
So it's those little things, and a lot of the PGA Tour players are steeper than people think. They shallow it out immediately, then they steepen it up. So that's another thing that Instagram kind of gets in people's heads, and YouTube rabbit holes. But yeah, if they just took all that glamorous stuff away and they just worked on keeping that club to match their body and the center of mass and stuff with the least amount of movement possible, they'd be a lot better players.
Yeah, no doubt. You've identified, the truth of the matter is that it needs to be addressed. So, grateful that you're working on it, and hopefully people understand and are willing to, take it seriously.
But again, I know nothing, and that could change in a year, and we just may start throwing it around, and who knows?
Sure, yeah.
We just may try to set it as much as possible next year. Who knows?
Yeah, fair enough. Got to stay up to date on that. I have to ask, again, a lot of insight, really valuable insight that you've given me here today. But before we finish up, I want to ask you just a couple general questions here. One being golf hero growing up. Who's the guy that kept you watching every week?
Tiger. I was born in 1984. I'm the quintessential middle of the Tiger era. The fist pumping, the red polo, the black pants, black shoes. I am a Tiger guy through and through. Before that, I really didn't watch much golf. Honestly, I wanted to play basketball, baseball, football. I wanted to play those 3 sports. And then Tiger came along. My grandfather played. I started playing. So I'm a Tiger guy.
Yeah.
I'm 100% Tiger Woods.
Yeah, can't blame you. If he's playing, I got my eye on him. I'm hoping something amazing happens.
Yeah.
But it's been a while. Other than that, what's the hardest hole for you down there at the Grove, and then at the other Nashville clubs? What have you identified as just a trouble hole for you?
The hardest hole at the Grove is number 5. It's a 240 yard, it's 225 to the middle, 242 to the back, par 3. It's a little kidney bean green that kind of, if you're pin high right, it kicks away into this big collection area that's a pretty tough up and down. You got bunkers left that's pretty hard. It's just a really hard hole. Usually the wind is into off the right. And it doesn't really set up to fade that hole, so you kind of have to ride it sometimes. But it was the hardest hole. Every year it's the hardest hole in the Simmons Make Open, which is the KFT event. It was the hardest hole in the Live. It's just a really tough hole. The 18 at Belle Meade is I used to work at Belle Meade. 18 is a great finishing hole, but it's just man, you've got to be prepared to just hit 2 really good shots. It's straight away. You got bunker on the left, rough on both sides, overhanging trees. People are sitting there watching you, so you get a little nervy if you're playing good. But I think that's a very underrated hole in Nashville is 18 at Belle Meade because it's just a straight away pretty hard par 4.
I see. Is there anything about
Yeah.
your shop, your kind of shot shape or the way you hit it that doesn't play well to some of the holes? What is kind of your, a worst designed hole possible for you right now? Is it distance? You had mentioned you're just trying to be an amazing short game.
No, I still hit it, 115, 170, 165 to 170. Distance isn't a thing. Um, just, probably a mid to long iron ball striking par three.
Sure.
The Golf Club of Tennessee from the back tees, that's like most of the par threes out there. It's a 5 iron, 4 iron.
Thanks.
Where it's just kind of still long irons where if my right hip does kick out a little from me not being having a good enough stability there, that thing just kind of goes left.
Gotcha.
And if anyone that plays golf and you're trying to hit a 220-yard 4 iron that starts left and goes left, you're probably going to make a bogey or worse.
Sure. Yep.
So just stuff like that.
Fair enough. I'll be getting the opportunity to
Yeah.
play down there at the golf club, so wish me luck. I don't think we'll be playing the tips though, so shouldn't have to worry about
Yeah,
that.
beautiful. It's a beautiful golf course. Par threes are hard. Par fives are easy. Par threes are hard.
Gotcha.
Yeah, awesome place though.
Yeah, I'm excited to play. Well, very good.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming on the pod here, taking the time.
yeah. Thank you for your time.
Of course, where is best place for someone to reach out to you, social medias or any place where if someone's interested in a lesson or just learn more about the stuff you're doing, where can they go?
Yeah, they can look me up on socials, Jude Lenahan Golf. That's also my email, judelenahangolf@gmail.com. They can give me a shout with any questions, comments, or concerns they may have about their golf game and or swing.
Very good. Easy enough.
Yeah,
Alrighty. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. We'll be in touch and we'll find a time to do something similar here where we can get out maybe on a range and we'll hit some balls and film another
yeah,
podcast and do some interesting stuff there.
yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Well, thanks
Thanks,
very
brother.
much. Of course.